Welcome everyone to our webinar. We are really excited to have our behavior support services team here sharing a little bit more about what is applied behavior analysis. And then my name's Dakota and I'll be kind of moderating if there's any questions or anything like that that comes up in the chat. And so we also want to acknowledge that Utah State University is a land grant institution, and our activities throughout the state of Utah take place on tribal ancestral lands. These lands have been carefully stewarded by the Goshute, Navajo, Shoshone, Paiute, Ute, and Mountain Ute tribe. We offer our respect and recognition for their elders past, present, and future. I'd also like to just share a little bit about the Sorensen Center, and these are a list of our various services that we provide. I think I actually need to update this list because we're always adding new things. And so if anybody has questions about the Sorensen Center, feel free to contact me. My phone number and email are there below. And then I also want to just go over the webinar decorum. So like I mentioned, it is being recorded. If during the presentation, remain muted unless answering or, asking a question or answering a question. You can also send questions to me privately or to everyone in the chat. And then we'll also have a question and answer the last 15-ish minutes, depending on how long the presentation goes. And then update, there will be a link available, but it will be to our YouTube channel, not a box link. So just update there. Well, I will go ahead and stop sharing and turn the time over to Alyssa.
Can everyone see this okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. I'm actually going to let Milad go first.
All right, awesome. Hello, everyone. Hope you're all doing well and having a good evening. My name is Milad Najafi. I'm a first-year doc student in the special education department here at Utah State, specializing in applied behavior analysis under the mentorship of Dr. Jocelyn. And I also work here at the Behavior Support Services.
And my name is Elisa Hurd. I'm a second-year doc student in the psychology behavior analysis program. And my advisor is Dr. Katie Brown, and I'm also a graduate student clinician with Behavior Support Services.
All right, so today we're going to talk to you guys a little bit about applied behavior analysis and kind of what it is. Sorry, my clicking isn't working as quickly as I'd like it to. Tell you a little about some of the basic principles of behavior analysis. Then I'll talk about some of the various areas where behavior analysts have done work and continue to do work. And then Elise is going to tell you guys a little bit about severe problem behavior in specifically, and then talk about behavior support service clinic and just some of the stuff that we do there and some of the process of getting started there. And we'll tell you a little bit about some summer workshop series that we have coming up. All right, so what is applied behavior analysis, or ABA, as it's commonly called? ABA is the science of behavior that's devoted to better understanding what behavior is, how it works, and how we can improve it. When we try to understand behavior, we look to the environment to better understand how it is. We look at the events that take place before behavior happens, and we look at the events that come right after behavior happens to better understand it. And you'll kind of hear me talk about the environment a lot and about the consequences, because it is very important. So I'll be repeating that tons and tons throughout. In ABA, we focus on socially significant behavior. That is socially significant behavior to the clients that we serve and their families. Our goal is to change behavior in a meaningful way that improves the quality of life of the clients that we serve. So as promised, like I said, the environment plays a really important role in how we understand behavior and how behavior really works and how we learn and whether we continue to engage in a particular instance of a behavior in the future. Our behaviors they serve a purpose for us. That is that when we engage in behavior to get things that we want or get out of doing things that we don't want. So we do them because our behaviors work for us, that they get us the things that we want and they serve a purpose. We refer to the purposes that our behavior serves as functions of behavior. And we think of like, so we're talking about a little bit about problem behavior and just behavior in general, but more particularly in problem behavior, we can think of like 4 broad categories of why we engage in instances of behavior. So, and I'll kind of go over one of each of these. We could engage in behavior to get attention from others in our environment. When this happens, we would say that that behavior is maintained by attention. Another reason that we sometimes engage in instances of behavior would be to get out of doing stuff that we don't like or avoid doing things that we don't want to do. When this happens, we'd say that behavior is maintained by escape. Similarly, we can engage in behavior to get access to items or activities in our environment that we want. When this happens, we'd say that our behavior is maintained by a tangible function. We can also engage in behavior because it allows us to access some form of sensory stimulation. One example would be that you've got a bug bite on your arm and it's itchy, so you scratch it. That behavior of scratching provides you with a form of sensory relief. So we'd say that behavior of scratching is maintained by automatic function. Like I said, our environment plays a really important role, and we look at the things that come before our behavior, a behavior we're interested in happens, and the things that come right after the behavior we're interested in. When we think about the things that come right before our behavior, we call these the antecedents. What it really means is what was happening in the environment right before the behavior that we're interested in happens. When we're looking at this, sometimes we're looking at specific triggers that might be in place, that sometimes when this thing happens, it typically is followed by an instance of behavior. Or if not, we might just we're also just looking to see what the environment looks like right before the behavior happens. And then we're also looking what happens right after behavior happens, or the consequence. And I just wanted to clarify too, that when we use the word consequence, I know this can in our everyday language sometimes can have a negative connotation, as in like being in trouble or something, but the way we use it in ABA, or just when we talk about consequences, just more so what happened right after the behavior. What happened right after that behavior we're interested in happens. And the ABCs, and we call these the ABCs of behavior, and they really play an important role in our assessments and our treatment, because it gives us an idea of why somebody is engaging in a particular behavior. Once we know why somebody's engaging in a particular instance of a behavior, then we can modify the environment in a way and change behavior in a way that we want. So one way that we use this ABCs of behavior is in a form of data collection that's quite common, that we use regularly in the clinic, works that we do here at the clinic, at schools, and really one of the most common forms of data collection. And the name kind of gives it away. It's ABC data. So it's a descriptive account of the behavior of interest. And it just kind of tells us about what is the behavior that we're interested in, what happened right before it, and during and after that behavior happens. And we commonly use it to identify triggers and consequences that come before and after behavior. So I'll give you guys an example, and then we'll watch a video too and see if we can all guess at what it is. So an example would be a mom asks her child to eat her vegetables. So the child starts to cry and say that she doesn't want to eat the vegetable. So the mom says, oh, it's okay, fine. You don't have to eat it today, but tomorrow you're going to have to eat your vegetable. In that example, the antecedent would be mom asking the child that she needs to eat her vegetable. The behavior that we'd be interested in would be the kid crying and complaining that she doesn't want to eat the vegetables. And the consequence would be the mom telling the child that she doesn't have to eat the vegetable, and also the child getting out of having to eat her veggies. We're going to watch a video. I think, I'm not surprised we've got technical difficulty, but so the video is the mom, or I'm presuming it's the mom or a teacher or something, comes up to the kid and tells them, it's time to put your iPad down and do your math work. You can see you can see what happens where the child just throws the paper, screams and throws the paper on the ground. And then the mom tells the child that because of that, you don't get to use technology tonight. So let's see if we can actually here. There we go. So show you guys what the ABCs were. So the antecedent in this example was the child was asked to put the iPad down and do his math homework. The behavior was the child screams no and throws his math worksheet on the ground. And the consequence was that the child was told that he can't have technology tonight. So as promised, continuing to talk about the environment and the consequences in particular are really important in how we learn and whether we continue to engage in behavior. Generally speaking, when our behavior is followed by a pleasant consequence, we're more likely to engage in that behavior again in the future because we learned that this behavior gets us good things that we want. For example, you're thirsty, you drink a cold glass of water or some kind of drink, then you learn that in the future, when you're thirsty, having a cold drink gets rid of your thirst. Or similarly, if you're cold and you step outside, you put on your jacket, you're no longer cold. You learn that when you're cold, you put on a jacket or more clothing and good things happen. Similar with our behavior when it's followed by unpleasant consequences, we're less likely to engage in those behaviors again because we want to avoid those things and not come into contact with them again. An example would be you're driving on the freeway and speeding and you get pulled over and get issued a citation for speeding. In the future, you may be less likely to speed again to avoid getting a ticket, although that doesn't always work and sometimes might have to get a few tickets before we learn. But another example would be that two children are fighting and their parents take away their phones for the day. In the future, the children may be less likely to fight because they'd want to avoid the consequence of losing their phone. So in this next slide, I'm going to tell you guys about a few different strategies that we use in ABA and in our clinic here as well. But before we go through that, I just wanted to make it clear that the stuff that I'm hearing is by no means a form of training or it's not really extensive. This is just some general information about it. And it shouldn't mean that you go home and try this. We would want that if you are trying this, it would be in consultation with the behavior analyst. And once we've gone through our assessment process and come up with a detailed plan. So if you recall from the previous slides, we engage in behavior because they serve a purpose for us. They help us, they get us things that we want. Problem behavior sometimes ends up serving that purpose for people. They engage in problem behavior because it either gets them out of doing stuff that they don't want to do or it gets them access to things they want to do. One way we could use to reduce this is that we teach the person alternative behaviors that they can use to get them the things they want. And these are typically when we do these will be easier ways of getting it because problem behavior often is quite effortful as well. So we teach the individual an alternative way of getting what they want. And what this should do is allocate the responding to the alternative way. We often also combine this with another strategy in which once we know why somebody does something, then we stop giving them those things for the things they use to get their behavior. So we basically we stop responding to problem behavior. And what we know about behavior is that we do it to get things that we want. And once we respond to once our behavior no longer gets us the things that we want, then we're going to stop engaging in those behaviors because it just doesn't work anymore. And when we combine this strategy with the one that I just talked about above, is that now the individual has an alternative way that's easier and it's a more appropriate way of getting the things they want. And also their problem behavior no longer gets them the things they want. So they're responding naturally is allocated more towards the alternative, more appropriate response. We can also decrease problem behavior by just rewarding the absence of that behavior. For example, let's say we have a student in a classroom that engages in frequent instances of talking out. One way we could reduce that behavior would be that for every classroom period where the student doesn't talk out, they get some kind of reward, 5 minutes of free time or something like that. What we teach the student in this instance is that when they don't engage in problem behavior, good things happen to them. And lastly, we can enrich the environment. Similarly, like, so one, we know that we engage in behavior because we want to get things. One way we can reduce the problem behavior is by making those things freely available. The idea here is that we engage in behavior to get stuff that we want. But if those things are freely available to us in the environment, then we're less likely to engage in them because, well, we already have them. So that's not an exhaustive list. Those are just some examples of strategies that we use to deal with problem behavior and just behavior in general. In ABA, like I said at the beginning of the start, it's the science of behavior. The principles and some of the stuff that I talked about here can be applied across a variety of settings and places. And on this slide, you'll see just a list of some of the areas that behavior analysts have made meaningful impact and have worked and continue to work. And in the next couple of slides, I'll just go over a few of these areas in more detail. So early intervention, ABA is arguably known best for work that we've done in early intervention and teaching daily living skills, especially with population with autism and intellectual and developmental disabilities and things like that. Our work with this population begins from a very young age and infancy and can really continue for the duration of a person's life based on their needs. And we use ABA with this population quite often for skill acquisition to teach a variety of skills such as like hygiene, daily living skills, social communication, social skills, communication skills, academic, and really a bunch of other stuff. Oh, I don't know why it's went to that one. Sorry, it's being a little bit glitchy. I don't know if my internet is not good or no, but anyways, what I wanted to say on that last slide before it skipped too was that through the work that behavior analysts have done with that population of individuals with autism and learning disabilities and stuff, those people in those populations have gone primarily from living in institutionalized settings to being able to live closer to their homes, if not in their homes, within their communities, and being much more active and having an overall higher quality of life. Another area where ABA has had great success has been in education and academics. ABA has been used in this setting for over 60 years to improve learning and teaching. And one great example of the success of ABA in this area is direct instruction, which is a teaching model that emphasizes clear, unambiguous instructions, which I won't go into detail about what it is, but in one of the largest studies that was ever done in US education history that included over 200,000 students, they compared 22 different teaching models. And what they found was that the groups of students that were part of the direct instruction group had significantly higher academic achievements compared to students in other groups with different teaching models. And then also ABA has done a lot of work in special education as well. Continue on with education. Another example of work that behavior analysis has done has been through school-wide positive behavior support. This is a multi-tiered intervention approach that aims to improve social and academic behavior of students. And the multi-tiered design of this system means that all students get some form of support. And then the students that need more support will receive more intensive interventions and support. What that looks like is that everybody at the school, everybody will have some form of intervention that typically promotes pro-social student behavior, and everybody in the school gets that. And then we'll have more targeted interventions for classrooms that may need more support or small groups or individuals, and this will just all be based on the needs of the groups or the individuals. One example of an intervention, of a class-wide intervention that works really well within this context and has been used for over 50 years in schools to increase appropriate classroom behaviors and decrease disruptive behaviors is the good behavior game. This is the intervention is played in the form of a game in which certain classrooms expectations are set and students are rewarded for following those expectations. And just a note on the good behavior game, we've done, our group here at USU, we've done lots of training of teachers in the local schools area within the Cache County School District of helping them implement the game and getting it started and all of that. And lastly, we've got area of organizational behavior management. And this is just another area. This is OBM uses the same principles of behavior analysis and just applies them to the workplace. OBM consultants have worked in a variety of settings that have ranged from healthcare, finances, manufacturing, and numerous other places to improve workplace performance. And just some examples of outcomes that they've got is reduced accidents and injuries and improvements in employee retention, training, customer satisfaction, increases in revenues and products and things like that. The point that I kind of wanted to make over about the last couple of slides with the different subspecialties of ABA is that ABA is not just about working with individuals with autism or learning disabilities or dealing with problem behavior. It's a science of behavior, and its principles have been applied across a variety of settings and can be used across a variety of settings. So that was all for my bit, and then now it's off to Lisa.
Thank you. So I'm going to jump in and talk about another subspecialty of ABA, which is severe problem behavior, like Milad mentioned. I'm just going to move everyone so I can see. Okay. And similar to Milad's point, problem behavior can be displayed by individuals with a wide range of diagnoses, developmental levels, and ages. It's not specific to children with autism. Severe problem behavior can take a few different forms. It can look like aggression, like hitting, kicking, biting. It can look like self-injury, like self-hitting, head banging, property destruction, like throwing items, breaking items, or non-compliance with things like homework and chores. And severe problem behavior can have some pretty significant risks. Some examples include physical injury, anywhere from just mild reddening of the skin to broken bones and tissue damage that might require emergency medical attention. It can also cause difficulty socializing with peers, increased stress level of the individual's caregivers, and even suspension or expulsion from school. Problem behavior often develops as a means to communicate wants and needs. And if you remember how Milad talked about the functions of the behavior, severe problem behavior often falls into one of those categories, such as attention. So if a child repeatedly hits their sibling to get mom's attention, like Milad said, we would consider that behavior to be motivated to get access to attention. Or an example of tangible would be, I think if we've all seen a kid throw a tantrum as soon as their iPad is taken away, we would say that that behavior of tantruming is maintained by access to that iPad, which is a tangible item. At Behavior Support Services, it's a clinic in the Sorensen Center at USU, and we focus on the evaluation and interventions for severe problem behavior using applied behavior analytic principles. We serve a wide range of individuals across diagnoses, age, and behaviors. For diagnoses, we see anywhere from neurotypical to individuals with developmental disabilities and other behavioral disorders. For ages, we see children all the way to adults, and behaviors we see across the board, aggression and self-injury all the way to lying and stealing. The Behavior Support Services Clinic has specially designed therapy rooms for intervening on severe problem behavior that help to maximize safety of the individual as well as those who are working with them. And we have highly trained therapists who help conduct therapy sessions, and these pictures are some Just some pictures of our therapy rooms. The Behavior Support Services Clinic has two primary service providers, Dr. Ray Jocelyn and Dr. Katie Brown. Dr. Jocelyn has his PhD in psychology with a specialization in behavior analysis, and he is a doctoral level board certified behavior analyst, as well as a state licensed behavior analyst in Utah. He's practiced behavior analysis across many different settings, including schools and institutional settings. And he has several different specializations, including classroom management and functional interventions. If you'd like to get a hold of him, his email address is listed there. And we also have Dr. Katie Brown, who has her PhD in behavior analysis and is also a doctoral level board certified behavior analyst and state licensed behavior analyst in Utah, as well as a licensed clinical mental health counselor. Dr. Brown has worked across several different settings as well, including severe behavior and early intervention clinics. I'd like to walk you through what a general admission looks like. This is going to look different from individual to individual, but generally this is the process that's followed. So for families referred to our clinic, we begin with an initial evaluation where we ask questions about the behaviors, like what they look like, how often they occur, common triggers, and how severe they are. We also conduct brief assessments and observations just to get a better sense of what the behavior looks like. And the initial evaluation is also used to help us determine an appropriate level of service. In general, we either recommend an outpatient model, which looks more like consultation and is sometimes done in the home via telehealth, or intensive outpatient, which is more of a one-on-one working in the clinic with therapists. Next, we would conduct a functional assessment to determine what triggers the behavior. Think back to those categories of functions that we talked about. And then once we know what triggers the behavior, we develop an intervention that targets that specific trigger. Common goals include decreasing problem behavior and increasing adaptive skills like communication and compliance. We also offer caregiver training. So like Milad went over earlier, we do some more training on the ABC data collection, how to effectively give instructions, differential reinforcement, which is really just a fancy way of saying you give attention and rewards and other good things for appropriate behavior, and you withhold attention and other good things for inappropriate behavior, as well as the child-specific intervention procedures. Once we have an intervention that works, we want to make sure that it's not only going to work in the clinic or with certain people. We want to make sure it's going to work across settings like home and school or out in the community, and across people like new people, to make sure that we can promote long-term success. And we also offer follow-up to make sure that that long-term success is continuing. Along with behavior therapy, we also offer school consultation services. We offer support to teachers or other school staff who have individual students with challenging behavior. We also work with teachers to improve group behavior, like Milad mentioned, with the good behavior game. We also have workshops and training on functional assessment, data collection, and classroom management as examples. If you'd like to get in contact with us, we do have a website listed here. And this is going to be held on July 19th. We also have Project Launch that will be held sometime in August. And it's really a jumpstart to help families access resources for individuals with autism. And then we also have one for practitioners in the field for which CEUs are available that will go over the new ethics code for behavior analysts, and that will also be held in August. We also have behavioral parenting, as well as behavior-based practices for parents with children of all ages, strategies for improving your child's behavior at home and school. We have classroom management, and that workshop is going to be for teachers and practitioners. And that will go into some evidence-based classroom management strategies, group contingencies, and the good behavior game. And finally, we have efficient functional assessment and intervention. And again, this is targeted at professionals like school and behavior staff and other practitioners. And that will be about how to conduct functional assessments and implement behavior intervention plans efficiently, effectively, and legally. And that is the end. Does anyone have any questions?